The wind that swept through Boston on that bitter winter night of February 3rd, 1871, carried with it more than just snow and biting cold. It carried whispers. Whispers of a story that had haunted the city for nearly half a century. At 26 Primrose Lane, a grand but decaying Victorian mansion stood cloaked in ivy and shadow. Its windows were shuttered tight, and yet neighbors swore they often saw candlelight flickering inside and caught glimpses of two women, identical and pale as moonlight, watching silently from the upper floor. They were known as Clara and Margaret Callahan, sisters born in the late 1820s. And yet in 1871 they appeared no older than 25. No one had ever seen them age. The reporter James Whittaker, a young investigative journalist for the Boston Herald, had heard the rumors countless times in the taverns and cafes of the city. Most dismissed them as folklore, like ghost stories sailors told to scare children. But James was different. He had built his reputation on chasing the strange and unexplained. One night, over a pint of ale, an old sea captain leaned toward him and whispered, "You want a story, lad? Go to Primrose Lane. Those Callahan girls ain't natural. Haven't aged a day since I was a boy, and I'm 63 now. Folks vanish round that house. Always the same two faces in the window, smiling like death itself." James felt the familiar chill of intrigue. Two sisters frozen in youth for 40 years? It was impossible. But if there was even a shred of truth, it would be the story of the decade. The very next evening, he set out through the snow, notebook and lantern in hand, determined to uncover the truth. The house on Primrose Lane, the Callahan mansion, loomed like a specter at the end of the lane. Its wrought iron gate hung crooked, the garden beyond overgrown and wild. The windows were dark, except for one faint glow on the second floor. As James approached, the air seemed to grow unnaturally still. Even the snowflakes fell slower, as if the world itself held its breath. He knocked on the heavy oak door. To his surprise, it opened almost instantly. Standing before him was Clara Callahan, her skin pale as porcelain, her auburn hair flowing like molten copper in the candlelight. She looked no older than 25, her emerald green eyes piercing and unnervingly calm. "Mr. Whittaker," she said softly, though he had never introduced himself. "We've been expecting you," James faltered. "Expecting me? But how?" Before he could finish, another figure emerged from the shadows. Margaret Callahan, identical to her sister in every detail, save for a faint scar above her left brow. She, too, smiled with unsettling serenity. "Do come in," Margaret said. "It's dreadfully cold tonight." The dinner. The sisters led James into a lavish dining room. Though the house's exterior was in ruin, the inside was immaculate, frozen in time like a painting from decades past. Crystal chandeliers glimmered above a feast fit for royalty, roasted pheasant, candied fruits, fresh bread still steaming. As James sat, he noticed the portraits on the walls. They depicted Clara and Margaret, unmistakably them, yet dated 1831, 1847, 1859, and now 1871. In every painting, they looked exactly the same. Trying to keep his voice steady, James asked, "Pardon me, but you haven't seemed to change much over the years." Clara's lips curled into a cryptic smile. "Time is a peculiar thing, Mr. Whittaker. For some it passes. For others, it simply stops." James forced a laugh. "Surely there's a reasonable explanation." "Oh, there is," Margaret replied smoothly. "Though whether you consider it reasonable depends on your appetite for truth. The tale of the sisters, over dinner. The sisters revealed their story, or at least a version of it. In 1831, they had been young debutantes from a wealthy family. One summer evening during a masquerade ball, they met a mysterious stranger named Dr. Elias Blackthorne, a physician with radical theories about life and death. Fascinated by his charisma and brilliance, the sisters became entangled in his experiments. "He promised us eternal youth," Clara said, her voice a whisper now. "A life free from the decay of age, but there was a cost. To remain youthful, the sisters needed to consume the essence of others. Not flesh, not blood, but something far more elusive. A person's life force. drawn through a ritual Blackthorn had devised. The ritual required two conduits, twins or siblings bound by love and shared blood. Clara and Margaret had been the perfect vessels. Over the decades, they lured unsuspecting visitors to their mansion under various pretenses, draining them of vitality until nothing but a lifeless husk remained. James stared at them in horror. You're murderers!" Margaret's eyes glimmered coldly. "We are survivors, Mr. Whitaker. The world fears what it cannot understand. Would you not cling to life, if given the choice?" The trap James realized too late that the dinner had been a trap. His limbs grew heavy, his vision blurred. The wine, drugged. Clara's voice seemed to echo from far away as she stood over him. "Do not struggle, dear journalist. It will only hasten the process. Your story ends here, and ours continues." As his consciousness faded, James caught sight of a strange sigil etched into the floor beneath the table. Two interlocking serpents devouring each other's tails. The air around it pulsed with a dark, unnatural energy. He heard chanting, ancient and guttural, as the sisters began the ritual. The intervention, just as darkness threatened to claim him, the front door burst open with a crash. A group of men stormed in, neighbors and townsfolk armed with torches and pistols. At their head was Captain Doyle, the same old sailor who had warned James. "Enough of this devilry," Doyle roared. "The whole town knows what you are, witches." The sisters hissed like cornered animals, their beauty twisting into something monstrous. Their skin shimmered unnaturally, their eyes glowing like embers. Margaret lunged at Doyle, but he fired his pistol point blank. The bullet struck her heart, and to James's astonishment, she shattered into ash, scattering across the ritual circle. Clara screamed, a sound that seemed to shake the very walls. She fled up the grand staircase, Doyle and his men in pursuit. The final confrontation, James, barely conscious, forced himself to crawl toward the ritual sigil. He sensed its power was the key to the sisters' longevity. If he destroyed it, Clara's immortality would crumble. With the last of his strength, he seized a fallen torch and plunged it into the etched floor. The sigil ignited in a burst of blinding light. From upstairs came a scream, Clara's scream, followed by the thunderous collapse of the entire west wing of the mansion. When the smoke cleared, there was no sign of her, only a pile of rubble and the faint smell of burning roses. Aftermath James awoke 3 days later in Doyle's home. The townsfolk had pulled him from the wreckage, barely alive. The mansion was gone, reduced to cinders. The newspapers ran sensational headlines about the witch sisters of Primrose Lane, but James never published his full account. Who would believe it? 2 women who had cheated death for 40 years? And yet, as he lay recovering, he could not shake the feeling that Clara Callahan still lived. Sometimes, late at night, he swore he saw her reflection in his window, youthful, beautiful, and smiling that same unnerving smile. Epilogue, 1901, 30 years later, a young couple bought a brownstone in Boston. The wife, while unpacking, noticed their neighbor across the street, a striking woman with auburn hair and emerald eyes. Waving politely from an upstairs window, when asked her name, she replied with a soft, knowing smile. Clara Callahan. And just like that, the nightmare began anew.